December 16th, 1944. The day the Ardennes forest exploded. They asked me what it was like, fighting in the Battle of the Bulge. They've seen the movies. Patton's Third Army racing to the rescue, heroic last stands, American triumph against the odds. They want war stories. They want heroes. I'll tell you what it was like. It was cold. So cold your fingers froze to your rifle. So cold men died in their foxholes overnight, just froze to death. So cold that when you finally got hit, you almost welcomed it because at least the blood was warm. I'm 51 years old now. 31 years since the Bulge, and I still can't handle winter. Can't stand the cold. My wife keeps the house at 75 degrees year-round because anything less and I start shaking. Not from the temperature, from the memory. Frank Morrison, Detroit, Michigan. I was 20 years old when I got drafted in 1943. Factory worker, strong back, not much education. The Army sent me to basic training, shipped me to England, then France. I joined the 106th Infantry Division in November 1944. We were green, brand new division. Most of us had never seen combat. They put us in a quiet sector of the line, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Nothing ever happened there, they said. Good place to get acclimated, learn the ropes, ease into the war. We'd been on the line for maybe 2 weeks when it started. December 16th, 05:30 hours. Still dark, still freezing. I was in a foxhole trying to stay warm, half asleep when the artillery started. At first, I thought it was our own guns. Had to be. The Germans were beaten, retreating, almost finished. Everyone said so. The war would be over by Christmas. We were just holding the line until then. Then the shells started landing on our positions. Hundreds of them, thousands. The whole forest lit up like daylight, and I realized we weren't holding anything. We were about to be overrun. The barrage lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of non-stop artillery fire. The earth shook. Trees exploded. The snow turned black with dirt and smoke. Men screamed in their foxholes, some from wounds, some from pure terror. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were in a quiet sector. The Germans were finished. Nobody had told the Germans that. When the shells finally stopped, my ears were ringing so bad I couldn't hear anything else. Just this high-pitched whine that wouldn't stop. Sergeant Kowalski, tough Polish kid from Chicago, been with the division since stateside, crawled over to my foxhole. "They're coming," he said. I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips. "Get ready." Through the smoke and fog, we saw them. Gray shapes moving through the trees, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. German infantry advancing in waves. And behind them, the sound that made my blood freeze, the rumble of tanks. We opened fire. The whole line erupted. Machine guns, rifles, everything we had. Germans dropped in the snow, but more kept coming. They just kept coming. For every one we killed, 2 more appeared. Our lieutenant, kid named Harrison, 23 years old, fresh out of officer candidate school, was running up and down the line trying to coordinate our defense. A shell landed maybe 10 yards from him. The blast threw him 15 feet. When we got to him, both his legs were gone below the knees. Just gone. He looked up at us, confused, like he couldn't understand what had happened. "I can't feel my feet," he said. Then he saw what was left of his legs and started screaming. We didn't have time to help him. The Germans were on top of us. By noon, we were falling back. Not retreating, running. The Germans had broken through in multiple places. Tiger tanks rolling through the forest, crushing our positions. Infantry following behind, mopping up. Our company of 140 men was down to maybe 40, and we were scattered, disorganized, running for our lives. I ended up in a small village with maybe a dozen other guys. Don't even know what it was called. Just a handful of houses and a church. We tried to set up a defense, but we didn't have heavy weapons, didn't have anti-tank guns, didn't have a plan. What we had were rifles and fear and the certain knowledge that we were cut off behind German lines. Night fell around 1700 hours. It got colder, always colder. We could hear German vehicles all around us in the darkness, engines, voices. We were surrounded, and that's when the real horror began. We held that village for 3 days. 3 days that felt like 3 years. The cold was the worst enemy, worse than the Germans almost. The temperature dropped well below zero. We had summer uniforms. Nobody had expected winter combat. Our boots weren't insulated. Our coats weren't thick enough. We had no winter gear at all because this was supposed to be a quiet sector. The first night, Private Edwards from Tennessee just didn't wake up, froze to death in his sleep. We found him in the morning, curled up in a corner of the church, covered with every blanket we had. Wasn't enough. 22 years old. The cold killed him before the Germans got the chance. We couldn't bury him. Ground was frozen solid. We just moved him outside with the other bodies that were piling up. December 17th. The Germans probed our positions all day. Not a full assault. They knew they had us trapped, knew we couldn't go anywhere. They were just softening us up. Artillery, sniper fire, psychological warfare. At night, they'd call out to us in English, "Americans, you are surrounded. Surrender and you will be treated well. Stay and freeze to death." Some of the guys wanted to surrender. Can't blame them. We had no food, no water. Everything was frozen solid. No ammunition resupply coming, no reinforcements, no contact with our own lines. We were ghosts, already dead, but didn't know it yet. Sergeant Kowalski wouldn't allow it. "We hold," he said. "The Third Army's coming. Patton's coming. We just got a hold." But Patton was 100 miles away, and we all knew it. December 18th. That's when they hit us hard. Tiger tanks rolled into the village at dawn, machine guns blazing. We had one bazooka with 3 rockets. Private Wilson from Alabama took the first shot, hit the lead tank in the treads, stopped it. The Germans poured out, and we cut them down, but the other tanks kept coming. Wilson's second shot missed. Tank fired back. The explosion caught Wilson and 3 other guys. I found Wilson's dog tags in the rubble later. Had to dig through frozen body parts to get them. Thought his family should have something. We fell back to the church. Maybe 20 of us left now. Barricaded ourselves inside. Medieval warfare with modern weapons. The Germans had tanks, and we had stone walls 3 feet thick. It was the only thing that saved us. They shelled the church for hours. The roof collapsed. The walls cracked. Stained glass windows exploded, sending colored shards everywhere. Beautiful, in a terrible way. Blue and red glass mixing with red blood on white snow. Kowalski took shrapnel through his back, punctured his lung. Every breath bubbled with blood. He kept giving orders anyway, kept organizing our defense, even as he was drowning in his own fluids. "Hold the doors," he said, voice wet, weak. "Don't let them. In the church." He died that afternoon. December 18th, around 1400 hours. Last thing he said was, "Patton's coming." He really believed it. I took command, not because I wanted to, because I was the only sergeant left. 18 men surrounded, freezing, starving, low on ammunition. And I had to decide what to do. That night, the coldest night of my life, we huddled in the ruins of that church. Someone found some communion wine in the cellar. We passed the bottle around. It was frozen, slushy. We drank it anyway. Private Hernandez from Texas started crying. Not sobbing, just tears running down his face, freezing on his cheeks. "I want to go home," he said. "I just want to go home." "We all do," I told him. But I knew the truth. Most of us weren't going home. This church was going to be our grave. The cold would kill us, or the Germans would. Either way, we were dead men. December 19th, 3rd day. The Germans came again at dawn, and this time they didn't stop coming. The final assault came at 0600, still dark. We heard the tanks first, engines rumbling through the frozen morning. Then the infantry, hundreds of them, surrounding the church on all sides. They gave us one last chance. An officer with a megaphone speaking perfect English. Americans in the church, you have fought bravely. You have no food, no ammunition, no hope of relief. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. I looked at the 18 men with me. Boys, really. None of us over 25. Frostbitten, starving, exhausted. We had maybe 2 magazines of ammunition each, a handful of grenades. That was it. "What do we do, Sarge?" asked Private Martinez. Kid from New Mexico, baby face, always smiling before the battle. Wasn't smiling now. I thought about Kowalski, about his last words. Patton's coming. About how he'd refused to give up even as he drowned in his own blood. But I also thought about Edwards, frozen to death for nothing. About Wilson, blown apart trying to stop tanks with a bazooka. About all the boys who'd already died holding this God-forsaken village that nobody even knew the name of. "We surrender," I said. Some of the men looked relieved. A few looked betrayed, but nobody argued. We were done. 3 days in hell, and we were done. We walked out of that church with our hands up. 18 walking skeletons in tattered uniforms. The Germans searched us, took our weapons, our boots. They needed boots more than we did, I guess. Made us stand in the snow in our socks while they decided what to do with us. I expected them to shoot us. Heard stories about SS units executing prisoners. But these were regular Wehrmacht, and they looked almost as tired as we were. One of them, a sergeant about my age, gave me a cigarette. I was shaking so bad from the cold I could barely hold it. "You fought well," he said in broken English. "Brave men." I didn't feel brave. I felt like I'd failed. Failed Kowalski. Failed the men who died. Failed myself. They marched us east, away from the front lines, toward prison camps in Germany. It took 3 days of walking through the snow. We had no food, no water except what we could scoop up from the ground. 2 men died on that march, just collapsed and never got up. The Germans didn't shoot them, didn't need to. The cold did the work. We reached a collection point on December 22nd. Hundreds of American prisoners, all from units that got overrun in the first days of the offensive. The 106th Division had been shattered, thousands captured, thousands more dead. That quiet sector had turned into a slaughterhouse. They put us on trains. Cattle cars packed so tight you couldn't sit down. Took 4 days to reach the camp in Germany. Men died in those cars. Froze, starved, or just gave up. We couldn't even move the bodies. Just stood there, pressed against the dead, trying to steal their warmth. Stalag 9B. That's where I spent the next 4 months. But that's another kind of hell. A different kind of cold. The Battle of the Bulge was over for me on December 19th. But it never really ended. Stalag 9B, a prisoner of war camp in central Germany. Barracks designed for 200 men holding 500. No heat, no medical care, food once a day, watery soup, and a piece of bread that was mostly sawdust. But at least we weren't being shot at. At least we weren't in the cold, except we were still in the cold. The barracks had holes in the walls. Snow blew through at night. Men still froze to death, just slower. I tried to keep the men together. The 18 who'd surrendered with me at the church. Tried to keep their spirits up, keep them believing we'd make it home. But they were dying anyway. Not from bullets, from cold, from starvation, from disease, from giving up. Private Martinez went first. Dysentery, probably. Maybe typhus. The Germans didn't care enough to diagnose. He died in his bunk in early January, calling for his mother. I held his hand. It was all I could do. Private Hernandez, the kid from Texas, who'd cried wanting to go home, lasted until February. Pneumonia. His lungs just filled up, and he drowned in his own fluids. Same way Kowalski had died, but slower. Took him 3 days. By March, only 6 of us from the church were still alive. 6 out of 18. The others had died from everything except German bullets. My breaking point came on March 15th, 1945. 28 years old, and I broke. There was a new arrival. Young kid, maybe 19. Fresh capture from the Western Front. He had information. Patton's Third Army was advancing. The Germans were retreating. The war was almost over. Liberation was coming. Patton was coming, just like Kowalski had said, back in that church in December. Patton's coming, he'd said with his last breath. We just got a hold. But we hadn't held. We'd surrendered. And Kowalski had died believing we'd be rescued if we just hung on a little longer. I went back to my bunk and I started laughing. Couldn't stop. Hysterical laughter that turned into crying. The other men thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. We'd surrendered 3 days too soon. 3 days. If we'd held that church for 3 more days, Patton's advance units might have reached us. We might have been rescued instead of captured. Kowalski might have been right. But we'd never know. Because I'd made the call. I'd decided to surrender. I'd chosen to save 18 men, and 16 of them had died anyway. Died in this camp, slowly, miserably, while I watched. I'd failed them twice. Failed to hold the church. Failed to keep them alive in the camp. A guard came over, screaming at me in German to shut up. I couldn't stop laughing. Couldn't stop crying. He hit me with his rifle butt. I barely felt it. The pain inside was so much worse than anything he could do to me. They threw me in isolation for a week. A concrete cell with no light, no heat, no food. Just darkness and cold, and my own thoughts. By the time they let me out, I wasn't the same person who'd gone in. Something had broken that couldn't be fixed. Some part of me had frozen solid, like Edwards in that church. And it would never thaw. April brought liberation. Patton's Third Army reached the camp on April 2nd, 1945. Kowalski had been right all along. Patton had come, just 4 months too late. I came home to Detroit in June 1945, weighed 110 pounds. They put me in a hospital for 2 months, fed me, treated my frostbite, tried to put some meat back on my bones. The doctor said I was lucky. Lucky I'd only lost 3 toes to frostbite instead of whole feet. Lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. My mother cried when she saw me. My father shook my hand, said he was proud. My brother, too young for the war, asked if I'd killed any Germans. I couldn't answer him. Couldn't explain that I'd surrendered. That I'd let 18 men die in a prison camp. That Kowalski's last words haunted me more than any German soldier I'd ever faced. I tried to go back to factory work, the assembly line at Ford. Same job I'd had before the war. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't handle being inside. The walls felt too close, like the barracks at Stalag 9B. The noise of the machinery sounded like artillery. I'd freeze up, stop working, just stand there shaking. They let me go after 3 weeks, said I needed more time to adjust. I never adjusted. I went through a dozen jobs over the next few years. Construction, warehouse work, night watchman. Anything outside, anything where I could be alone. I couldn't handle crowds, couldn't handle people asking questions. Couldn't explain why I jumped at loud noises or why I couldn't be in cold rooms. The nightmares came every night, still do, not about the fighting, about the cold, about Edwards frozen in the church, about Kowalski bleeding out, saying Patton's coming, about Martinez dying in that bunk, calling for his mother, about the decision I made, surrender or hold, and wondering if I killed them all by choosing wrong. I married in 1950. Carol. Good woman, patient woman. We had 2 kids. I tried to be a good husband, a good father. But there were parts of me I couldn't share, parts that stayed frozen in that church in Belgium. Carol learned not to turn the heat down below 75, learned not to ask about the war, learned to hold me when I woke up screaming about the cold. She never complained, but I could see the weight of it wearing on her, being married to a ghost who couldn't quite remember how to be human. Every December, I disappear into myself. December 16th comes around and I'm back in the Ardennes, back in that village, back in the church making that decision. Carol takes the kids to her mother's house for a week, gives me space to be alone with my ghosts. I tried the VA hospital once, 1958, told a doctor about the nightmares, the shaking, the guilt. He said I had battle fatigue, said it would get better with time. Gave me pills that made me sleep, but didn't stop the dreams. I stopped taking them, stopped going to the hospital. Time doesn't make it better. It just makes it longer. 30 years of carrying this. 30 years of wondering if I made the right choice. 30 years of knowing that either way, surrender or hold, those men were probably going to die. But at least if we'd held, Kowalski would have been right. At least it would have meant something. I saw one of the survivors in 1962. Wilson, no relation to the Wilson who died with the bazooka. He'd been one of the 6 who made it. We met at a veterans reunion, recognized each other, shook hands, tried to talk but couldn't. Too much between us, too much weight. We had a drink, made promises to stay in touch, and never spoke again. What would we talk about? How we survived while better men died. How we surrendered. How we spent 30 years wondering if we'd made the right choice. The Battle of the Bulge ended in January 1945. The Allies won, pushed the Germans back, kept advancing until Berlin fell. Victory in Europe, May 8th, 1945. But I'm still in that church, still making that decision, still watching those 18 men die, half in the snow, half in the camp, and wondering if 3 more days would have saved them. They gave me medals. Bronze Star for valor, Purple Heart for wounds received, POW medal for time in the camp. They're in a box in my basement. Haven't looked at them in 20 years. I'm 51 years old. The house is 75 degrees. My hands still shake when it gets cold outside. And every December 16th, I wake up at 0530 hours and remember the sound of artillery in the darkness. The war ended 30 years ago. I'm still fighting it, still freezing, still wondering if I should have listened to Kowalski and held.